Have you ever browsed in incognito mode? It's probably not as incognito as you think. Google actually recently settled a $5 billion lawsuit after being accused of secretly tracking users in incognito mode. Google's defense was incognito does not mean invisible. In fact, all of your online activity is still 100% visible to a ton of third parties, unless if you use ExpressVPN. Without ExpressVPN, these third parties can still see every website you visit, even in incognito mode. So your ISP, your mobile network provider, the admins of your Wi-Fi network, ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your traffic through secure encrypted servers, so third parties can't see your browsing history. It hides your IP address. It's easy to use. It works on all devices, and it's rated #1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. Because I don't need third data parties looking at my data when I look up stuff like Chris Johnston sunglasses or Steve Dangle's Zamboni driver. I don't need any of that. Protect your online privacy today by using ExpressVPN. And you could visit expressvpn.com/Johnston. That's EXPRESSVPN.com/Johnston. And you can get yourself an extra 4 months for free. expressvpn.com/Johnston.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your #1 destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, let's talk Gavin McKenna. The biggest story this week in the hockey world is him leaving the WHL for Penn State. He is jumping from the CHL to the NCAA. He made the announcement on SportsCenter on ESPN earlier this week. This should kind of spur a big discussion about what it'll mean for so many players who have already made the jump from the CHL to the NCAA, what it could mean for the future. But we should start on the surface level. What did you think of the news of Gavin making the jump to college?
Well, it's a brave new world, right? And he's not the first player to officially do this, but this will be the first season where players can go from the CHL to the NCAA, and they've removed that rule where you're considered a professional by having played in the CHL. So that's opened the door to these kind of things. And obviously, Gavin McKenna is a special player. I mean, he finished last season with he had 54-game point streak at one point for the Medicine Hat Tigers, helped them get to the Memorial Cup. And so, he's had a unique opportunity, I think, to consider NCAA schools, to have the kind of NIL money that won't necessarily be out there for just any player. With him to receive $700,000 next season as part of this decision, which is obviously new in and of itself for hockey players playing in the NCAA. And so it's a pretty landmark moment, I'd say. And Gavin McKenna, he's on the younger end of things, right? He's still 17. Won the Canadian Hockey League Player of the Year. I mean, I can see the argument or the thought about, being able to take a step to play against older competition, to be with older players. And he's more than likely going to be the #1 pick in the 2026 NHL draft and be starting his NHL career one season beyond this coming one. So, great for him to get his choice of schools and, lands in a place where he really likes the facilities. Terry Pagula, the Sabres owners, pumped a lot of money into the program there at Penn State, and he gets to earn real dollars while continuing his hockey career and, trending towards being a pro.
Is him joining the NCAA going to make you watch more college games?
Probably not for me, but I think it's going to increase the interest in college. I mean, look, the interest is already high. Truth is there's just only so many hours in a day. I don't tend to watch many leagues other than the NHL, if I'm being honest, just because of the demands of the job. It's not because I don't think there's good hockey being played elsewhere. Grew up going to Ontario Hockey League games and have a lot of time for the CHL as well. But I do think it will increase the interest, and obviously the level of competition, I think, is going to go up now too, because you are getting more of the top players like Gavin McKenna, and I think he's not the last one to officially make that jump and to play down in the U.S. And I don't know how this is going to go. I realize this is probably a future question you got in the back of your mind, but I've talked to some people this week that feel that there's going to be almost like water. Like water's going to have to find its level here. That they actually think well, yes, players like Gavin McKenna going to the NCAA schools, like that's going to improve the level of hockey in the NCAA. But they also feel that now the NCAA teams will be a little less loyal, and that you might actually see players going the other way, taking opportunities in the Canadian Hockey League. So, in terms of how this cycle goes through over a number of years, I think it's too soon to really say. Like, I don't see this as the end of the CHL or anything like that. I should be clear about that. But certainly it's everyone's looking for the best opportunity that suits their needs. And now there's actual real choice for the players. I don't see how it's bad at all for them. But while Gavin McKenna might get $700,000 next year, it's not like that's the kind of money that's out there for just any player. And so, I think the financial aspect, like the impact of that, at least in the short term, is probably a little overstated, because I do think a lot of players just aren't able to command anywhere near those kind of dollars. But the opportunity part is probably what's most important. And for some people, going and playing at a school in the U.S. is better than the CHL lifestyle. But then you can make the argument CHL lifestyle is a little closer to the NHL, where there's more frequent games and all those types of things. I mean, that's an age-old argument that's been had over a long period of time. I think both avenues have proven to be great jumping points for athletes. It just depends on what your individual needs are.
If you were a player Gavin McKenna's age, which route would you choose? Would you opt to play in the NCAA if you could, or would you play in the CHL? I feel like I think I'd probably play in the NCAA, just with the NIL available, the collegiate experience playing, and whether you're at Ohio State, whether you're at Michigan, whether you're at Penn State, whether you're at Michigan State, any of those American collegiate schools. Like, I've always been enamored with American college sports. So I would find that really cool. And you get the opportunity to make some money. But also, of course, the CHL is still the CHL, and all these great teams and all these great opportunities that can lead you to the next level. Still very enticing. Just on the surface, I feel like I'd probably opt for the NCAA. I'm just curious what you'd pick.
It's so tough for me to think about. I mean, I'll tell you this. Like, one thing I've heard is that what's available to student athletes at these schools isn't universal. Like, some of them, and I'm talking top colleges, like there's a 90-minute ice time window a day, and you can't be on the ice other than that. Like, the rest of the time spoken for. So less time for, say, individual skills work or some things you might want to do. I've heard of some athletes that end up in NCAA programs, and they feel like they don't get a lot of individualized coaching if you're not maybe one of the main people of the team. But of course, I'm sure we could go to the Canadian Hockey League, and there's, not all the facilities are the same everywhere either. So, that's why it's hard to make a blanket statement. That being said, in this specific case, where Gavin McKenna has already had so much success in the Western League, where he does have this 1 year before he's almost certainly going to be a pro player, I could see the appeals of trying himself in a different league. Like, it's taking himself out of his own comfort zone again. Like, whatever comfort he built up in Medicine Hat, he's now got to go and sort of prove himself in a new competition. And while doing so, obviously earning a significant amount of money. I mean, I can't imagine anyone in his specific skates not making the kind of decision he did. Now, he might have went to a different school or what have you, but the point is, I can understand why he's going down the NCAA route. But we have to acknowledge he's a special player, and not everybody is in his position. Not everybody is 17 years old and has already had a dominant season to the degree he did in the WHL. Some players are still trending up at that age. And so, I think that's where it's going to be interesting how this all sort of shakes out over time. But, I love that the players have more options all around. I just think it was needlessly restrictive for too long. The financial aspect doesn't bother me. Obviously, that's a part of life. And in the other NCAA sports, the athletes are making significantly more money. Football, for example, or basketball. The NIL money is legit, serious money. So, but a lot of money is being made on those athletes too, right? With TV deals and the like in those sports. So, this is it's an interesting thing for hockey, and it's going to be a great season for Gavin McKenna. I mean, I don't see any downsides. I mean, maybe if he struggles a little bit, like if that adjustment doesn't happen as quickly, but even then, I still feel he's in a great position to be the number one pick in the 2026 draft. So, he's going to play at the World Juniors and all the things that you do in that sort of showcase season before your NHL draft year. So, and he's joining a great program where they've been to the Frozen Four and the likes in recent times too. So, I mean, there's not that many drawbacks on the surface anyways.
One last thing I want to bring up, just when we were originally talking about this topic earlier in the group chat, producer Drew kind of put this like funny idea in my head. Like, what if the NIL money gets like so good, not necessarily just for Gavin McKenna, but what if someone else, like a supernova player, or maybe just with, with rising tides, raise all boats and all that, like the money just goes up naturally. What if it gets to a point where like a young guy in college makes a stupid amount of money off NIL, like maybe even more or somewhere comparable to what they would make on their ELC, and it creates a situation where it's like, well, why do I need to rush to join the pro ranks if I'm going to make more money in college or have that experience in college, versus, especially since what we've seen already with players being like, I don't know if I want to join this team, maybe trade my rights somewhere else. Like, I mean, we've seen stuff like that already. I wonder if that kind of adds a little bit more to what players already go through in the NCAA and what they feel with their rights, right? Like, I'm very curious how that mixes it up too.
Yeah, I don't know how close that day is. I mean, it's a fun hypothetical. I mean, the way I look at it is that this is kind of business at the end of the day. Business always chases top talent. Top talent always gets the, disproportionate amount of the money involved in that exchange. And so I suppose those circumstances could happen. I mean, this is definitely a dated reference a little before your time, but Rocket Ismail came and played in the Canadian Football League once when he was a top talent rather than the NFL. Because of the way the money was flowing at that point in time. There's more option for him. Now, that ended up being kind of a one-off thing, and I don't even know how Rocket would view that in reverse if he made the right decisions or what have you. But, I mean, sometimes things like this crop up. And look, we have a new CBA that's been ratified now through 2030. There's not really a significant jump in what players can earn on their entry-level deals, at least in the guaranteed money. There is lots of bonus money available if you have great seasons in those first 3 years as an NHL player. But, maybe that could fall out of line somewhere. Maybe one school, there's a few very powerful hockey schools around the NCAA that have, well-heeled alumni. Maybe you could get to a point where that happens. It'd be fascinating to see. Again, I go back to the point where, this still suits the talent. Like the most talented, most special players, they're just going to have more choices now. They're going to have the ability to go chase that money if they want. And they could maybe even in that situation have the ability to say, you know what, I'm going to stay one more year in school. My education's important. I can earn just as much money here or more or what have you, and I don't jump right to the NHL. And then I would think if that happens where the NHL is losing out on players that truly it wants, then there's probably going to have to be adjustments made to the entry-level contract system at some point, or exceptions made, or some kind of rule where, the NHL teams are able to, again, get the players they want. So to me, it's sort of like when systems get reordered, which this is a big reordering of the way hockey development works, there's lots of things that'll come out of it that I think are all positive. So, it's all good for the players. I still feel like, though, we're a little ways off from, players like a lot of players being able to make big money in the NCAA. My sense is that's not really happening yet. But look, you got a special player in Gavin McKenna. It's a unique opportunity for a school like Penn State to get him, and they have the ability financially to do it. I mean, to me, it's a win-win-win from all sides. And I don't think Gavin McKenna is going to be hurt in any way by doing this in terms of being ready to play in the NHL, a year from now.
Well said. You mentioned the CBA. We should get to that because this week, the NHL and the NHLPA ratified their collective bargaining agreement. 4 years, they'll start in 2026. They'll run through 2030. Let me go through some of the big main points. You can fill in some blanks wherever needed. Starting in 26, an 84-game schedule. We have an 82-game schedule now. It'll be 84 games. The CBA will increase the minimum salary in the Players' Playoff Fund, a new playoff salary cap system that will close off the LTIR loophole. Cut-resistant neck guards will be the norm. It'll be mandatory for players starting in 2026. No dress code for players before games. Shortening the maximum length of contracts to 6 years on the open market and 7 years if a player re-signs with their current team. Right now, we're at the stage where players can sign up to 8 years with their own team and 7 years on the open market. Also, some other stuff with draft retention rights. Some stuff with front-loaded contracts as well. No more contracts with deferred payments too. There's a lot to go through with the CBA. A lot of main points I kind of shuffled through there. What are your thoughts on the ratification of the CBA and the fact that we will actually have labor peace through 2030. No lockout to speak of.
Yeah, I mean, it's unprecedented since Gary Bettman's become the commissioner of this league, which is a long, long time ago, that this is done so far out, right? I mean, the other agreement that is in place now doesn't expire for another year from September 15th. So, they got this done 14 months early and ratified. That's progress. I think the 4-year term makes sense because, when you get into a peaceful time labor-wise, which is what I described where we're at, there's value in having that deal come up every few years because it just gives you a chance to tweak things and, make adjustments. I think the players want to retain that right, especially from their end of things. And, the changes really aren't material type of changes. There's a lot of them, as you mentioned, a lot of small things I would say that have been changed, but nothing fundamental to how the system works. A big one the fans will see, of course, is more games in the regular season. I'm of two minds about that. I understand why it's happening. This is still largely a gate-driven league. 2 more games for each team is quite simply more money coming into the pot that the players and owners are splitting. And they're doing it at the same time they're limiting training camps. Training camps are being condensed in terms of the number of days, so they're going to be shorter. And if you have 100 games played in the NHL, you're capped at 2 exhibition games. So the actual material difference for players, some players probably go through a preseason and play only 2 games currently, but more often than not, I think you see 3 or 4, and then it's an 82 game schedule. The net result here is I think most players will play the same number of games if you add up preseason and regular season. It's just that there's going to be more that are officially regular season games. I could see a world. I've always wondered when this is going to start, but I still think we're going to eventually run into some of the problems you see in the NBA where they have trouble with players resting a lot. And I know it's not necessarily in the nature of hockey players. I mean, this is such a sport where players almost weirdly play through injury as a badge of honor, right, is part of what happens. But I wonder if the more games you get, at some point you risk, players, basically teams resting players more often. And if that creates issues that need to be addressed down the road, I mean, we'll see how that works. But, in the final analysis, 2 games isn't that many. I'd love to see them go the other way. I know that's pie in the sky, and I recognize that would hurt the bottom line here. And everybody at the table is wanting to make more money, not less. But I do think a little bit of a less is more mentality could work. I think you'd see more compelling games. I think maybe the athletes could be fresher. But as I say, I'm old man yelling at a cloud by even bringing that up here. That was not part of the discussion as they went through these talks. But, I do think that, you have a system that's largely working. We'll see how the playoff thing, works out. There's actually a clause in the deal. We haven't seen the full, CBA. They have basically, the lawyers have not written it all out. It's usually 500 or 600 page documents. So, we don't know. We only have a high level understanding of these changes based on sort of point form notes. We'll see how it looks once the lawyers give it the full treatment. But there is, which point was I on there?
Oh, you were talking about. I think you were getting in on the playoff loophole, the LTI.
Oh, right.
Starting to get into that.
They left language in the agreement where they can reopen it on that specific issue. So basically, they're going to create some rules that they hope will close off the loophole, but they've left language in there that basically said but we're going to give ourselves a chance at a redo here if this doesn't work. So that'll be interesting. Teams are going to be allowed to now carry a 3rd goaltender everywhere. It's basically the end of David Ayers. That kind of story is probably not going to happen now. I shouldn't say impossible, but it's less likely if teams are going to have a regular 3rd goaltender that they travel with or that they're part of their team. You're probably the idea of a Zamboni driver coming into a game or an accountant. I think was the guy in Chicago a few years ago. I kind of like those stories, but I can understand. They sort of. They blended the nice storytelling element of wow, literally a guy off the street can find himself in an NHL game. But then the downside, of course, is this is the NHL. It's a very professional league, and this looks a little bush league when it happens, right? So from the storyteller in my heart thinks it's a little bit of a shame, but I can understand as a league why you're going that way. So, that's more jobs too. That's going to be an opportunity. We'll see what types of people end up being a 3rd goaltender. Obviously, It's not meant to be like the next person up per se. It's really more of a practice goalie / someone break in case of emergency option when something crops up. But yeah, I think it's obviously great for the industry. And, Olympic participation, not only in 2026, which we know about, but 2030 as well. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in there. And I think that everybody, and the reason this wasn't a fight, frankly, is everybody's doing pretty well in the current environment. The leagues come out of those COVID years probably better than they even could have guessed 5 years ago when it was all happening and it was triage mode. It felt like you were like trying to save an industry. But from a financial aspect, players are going to start getting paid more. And I think the owners are frankly going to make more money and see their franchise values go up because this labor piece is good for everybody.
I want to go back to you being an old man a couple of moments ago. And I know it was in relation to the schedule going up to 84 games. And I appreciate your answer where you added the necessary context of, the league still being a gate-driven league and revenues to be made. I want to hear your real answer about an 84-game season from the context of a hockey watcher and a hockey reporter. Because while I do appreciate the life that I live as a hockey reporter and being able to go to essentially one extra regular season game, my biggest gripe with the regular season as it is that it is too long for games that essentially do not matter in the grand scheme of things. That is my biggest beef with the regular season. And to extend it, again, one more home game, maybe another road game, 84 games, and too long for it to not matter in the grand scheme of things. That is my biggest issue with the regular season being extended 2 more games. I want to know if you feel that way, or am I just overstepping here? Because that's how I feel seeing that get to 84 games. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, it is too many games. That's kind of like I think we're in agreement there. I can't say that the games don't mean anything because there is playoff races, but and these games I should mention they'll all be 2 more divisional games. So some people might feel a certain way about that, but I mean it is going to give you more Rangers Islanders games or Battle of Alberta games or what have you as part of this deal. So I mean, at least they're giving you probably more of what you like while maintaining that every team plays every team home and away, which the NHL has been steadfast on because their experiences when you get a really special player in the league, like early days Ovechkin or Crosby, at that time every team didn't go to every team's rink, and so they felt like something was lost there. Yeah, I just think it is too many games. I mean, there's no way around that fact, but I don't really know the solution because if it puts more money in everyone's pocket, it's like how do you get off that cycle, right? I mean, this was a different perspective altogether, but I have a barber from another country who didn't grow up at all with the hockey culture, and we often talk about sports. He really loves professional soccer, and he can't even believe the playoff series are 7 games. He's like, it's so many games. How could it be 7 games? He's like, 3-game final is enough. Now I recognize that, but his argument is it makes it even more special. Like the less you see, probably the 7-game argument, even more than money, is that it gives it more often than not identifies the best team, which is the point, right? It gives, but I do think that there could be a world where less is more. We just don't live in that world yet. And look, and at the end of the day, I don't think it's worth. I'm not that fired up about it, but it's going to be more. It's more on the athletes. Like when you chop it up, you're asking your fans to pay more, to go to more games, to watch more games, and you're asking your players to play more games unless they don't. That's my early prediction. If you can log one prediction, is that this might start to see more and more of the targeted sitting out of games late in the season. I would love to see them go to the expanded playoffs that we've talked about and then cut the regular season games. Basically, you end up maybe with the same number of total games in an entire calendar, but you have more of the games be playoff-like games and you scale back the regular season. I do think that would offer the best way to eliminate what you're saying. Because even if you have 10 teams that get in, even if it's just to the wild card for 9 and 10 or 7, 8, 9 and 10, depending how you do it, then you have teams 11 and 12 that are in at least the wild card race later in the year, right? Like, I just think you have fewer teams that are officially eliminated when you get late in the season. But, the truth is I think right now the NHL regular season schedule is better than the NBA. Like, I think it is more compelling. Now, the NBA is probably winning on storylines and drama and all that stuff. But I think the game itself is in a pretty good spot. But where is the end? Like, it feels like we're definitely going into more expansion in the near future. And surely we're not going to get to 90-game season or something like that. Like, I hope that this is like as far as they're willing to expand, because way back in the 90s, I think 93, 94 might have been the last year, but they did have a couple seasons of 84 games. So it's not totally without precedent. That being said, there's a reason why it stopped. There's a reason why they went to it, and it was like, you know what, maybe this is too much. So, I do think they're pushing the limits of too much with that schedule.
Just, again, too many games. And I get fine. Yes, playoff races exist. It's just, I'm going to watch my team go through an 84 game season. And if they could, we've literally seen it the last how many years. You can be the best team in the league. Does not matter at all. Like, I get nothing out of it. That just always annoys me to no end. And I will stand on that soapbox forever. And I don't care if people give me shit for it. I don't care. I think it's stupid. But anyway.
So you don't think winning a President's Trophy has value just to say you did it even? Or
I don't think it has value at all. It literally does not have any value. We were at a point now where if you win a President's Trophy, we're like, well, this team's not going to win. It's true. We literally have it as a curse. If you win the President's Trophy, it is a curse. That's it. Like, I realize I'm sounding very uneloquent right now, but we are at a point where if you win the President's Trophy, there is a list of teams that have come before you where you look at them and you're like, yep, they didn't do it. Yep, they didn't do it. Yep, they didn't do it. Yep, that's what makes it so incredible. If you're a team that finds a way to go wire to wire and win the whole damn thing at the end. At the end of the day, if you win the Stanley Cup, that is all that matters. The Florida Panthers just won a Stanley Cup, where in the last month of the season, they looked banged up. They looked fallible.
Well, they rested players.
They rested players too, but like, there were some doubts that were creeping up about them, and it did not matter at all entering the playoffs. They not ran through, but they dominated. Yeah, they dominated in the playoffs this year. It did not matter. It did not matter in the slightest wherever they ended up.
Every round but round two, and then in round two, they dominated games 5 and 7 on the road. So anyway.
Yeah. You can go through the past episodes for the assessment on that. We don't need to reopen that can of worms.
No, but they didn't dominate the series. They just dominated the 2 games that the Leafs absolutely had to win. The Leafs won one of those games, they win the series. I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but anyway. But they lost 6-1 in both of them.
Yeah.
Crazy.
You don't think Leafs fans have been doing revisionist history on that series enough, CJ?
I don't know. I feel like Leafs fans are at the point where they don't want any excuses, where they're actually not in the, we lost to the cup winners kind of mode. Some teams do that. Like, some fan bases do that. They find comfort, like, wow, we lost to the cup winners. But I feel like that's not the vibe in Toronto right now. I think it's like, just do it. No one cares how, or, you know what I mean? It's almost like after so many years, the fans are at the stage, they just want to see it. They don't care about the details.
Very fair. Anyway, was there anything else you wanted to mention about the CBA? This isn't about, I shouldn't make this about me griping. Is there anything else you want to mention about the CBA that we didn't touch on?
At the end of the day, it's a great news story for the league, right?
It is.
And it's amazing how quickly they got it done. April to July, basically, got that thing wrapped up. I don't think there was very much pushback. I mean, some players, I guess, it's hard for us to really dissect it here, but some players might wonder about giving back that 1 year on the contracts. Because obviously we do see a number of players, even some in the last week or two, signing 8-year extensions. But, at the end of the day, if the league's salary cap keeps jumping, which is another part of it that it's already been announced, so it's not new news, but, under this CBA, the cap is going to be $113 million or whatever in a couple of years. So there's just going to be a lot more money out there to be made. So I don't know if it matters how long your contract is. You might want to take more swings at the plate if that's going to be the environment.
Yep. Get your 8-year deals now if you're in the NHL.
That's my
biggest thing. He did. He certainly did. And that one guy in Vegas did too. Anyway.
Number 93 in your program. Number 1 in your hearts.
Once a night, always a night. this is the last time I'm going to ask you until, next year, I guess. Just any updates on guys who could be available for trade or in the free agent market. I'm very curious specifically about Erik Karlsson. We went in on some Pittsburgh Penguins on our last episode, talking about Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust. What about the market right now for Erik Karlsson? How likely is it that he gets moved, and how likely are the Penguins to move him right now?
Well, he's willing to be moved, and so I think that helps, because obviously there's a no movement clause, but it's obviously only to a few places. And the flip side of this, I think Pittsburgh rightly views him as an asset, more of an asset the closer he is to the end of his deal, right? He's down to 2 years on that contract. And so the contract itself becomes less of a problem. 3 years ago, the contract was a problem. He's still got 5 years left. But when you get closer to the end, and obviously in the rising cap environment I'm describing, and on top of that, Pittsburgh does have an ability to eat even more money on it than San Jose already is, I think it becomes a pretty movable object. It just might not be this summer. And so, I don't have a feel for that. I still think the moves we discussed earlier this week involving Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust are far more likely in the short term for Pittsburgh, although those are two players as well. Both have term left on their deals. So it's, the Penguins are in this spot where obviously Kyle Dubas is turning things over, getting younger, but he's not under particular pressure in any of those circumstances to have to do something. I think he has the ability to kind of set a price and wait for it. And if it's not there, there is a trade deadline, there's next summer and all those types of things. I think a Karlsson trade still is possible. But the Penguins aren't just giving him away because they, I think still correctly see him as someone who can make a difference for a team. I mean, it was such a brief window of time, but seeing him drop into that Four Nations tournament sticks out in my mind, being in the building for those games, how in the middle of everything he was, right? And he still does the thing that teams need in terms of driving the puck up ice. Like you're going to have to live with the odd defensive mistake, and it's occasionally glaring with Erik, right? But you have to weigh that against all the good things he does. And I still think there's a lot of good in his game. And I have to believe at this stage of his career, because he was in San Jose when that team went from contender to not. He's arrived in Pittsburgh as they're headed in the wrong direction. I have to think he's going to get antsy at a certain point here and want to, as much as I think Pittsburgh's been a great fit for his family and he's like that aspect of living there, he's only got so much time, remaining on his clock too, in terms of trying to compete for a Stanley Cup. And so, I don't sense that as an imminent piece of business, but I do think the circumstances are going to align here that's going to see him traded at some point, in the nearish future.
There's a fan base in the Atlantic Division that would love to have Erik Karlsson back. I know that.
You think? I'm sure they're going to be in two minds about it. Aren't you? Wouldn't there be some concern? You're usually when you're going for a past glories thing, it doesn't go that well, right? And that can be for managers in baseball. I think of like Cito Gaston coming back to the Blue Jays, or it's just often the second or third act with Lindy Ruff in Buffalo. I'm not even blaming Lindy, but there's a lot of nostalgia wrapped up in the way fans feel about that and those decisions, but it doesn't usually pretend great things.
That's true. Michel Therrien and Claude Julian in Montreal.
I'll say it'd be a cool story because obviously the Senators are on a great trajectory. If that could ever work, it would be a cool story if you got back there at a time when they're on the way up again. Because really, if you look back when they traded him and Mark Stone, and that was signaling that they were on the way down, right? And so, could he catch the speeding train on the way back up? I mean, be interesting to see.
Be very fascinating to see. I'm not saying there's interest. There's just a fun discussion topic for everybody. Just saying. What about anyone else we should think of in terms of trades? I mean, we've mentioned Bo Byram enough. We've mentioned Rasmus Anderson. I could keep it moving to the UFAs if we want.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've kicked around, I think, a lot of the names that are still going to be out there, and still, some of them will no doubt make some news. I just may or may not be in this continent when it happens, so don't necessarily expect a show the next day.
That's true. I was thinking about it, like, depending on our summer plans, I'm very curious about any surprise episodes that might come up. But hey, you know what? You never know. Be on the lookout for that. What about Jack Roslovic, who I think we could probably agree is probably the most prominent free agent available on the market.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, you've got a few other players. Victor Olofsson, Matt Grzelcyk had a good year in Pittsburgh in terms of the points he put up that are still UFAs. I mean, look where we're at now, right? We're only a little more than a week past free agency, and already the market has ground to an absolute halt. That's why the first few days are a scramble, because if you don't get a job, I'm not saying all those players I mentioned, they're going to sign somewhere. They're going to be players in NHL next year. But it's just amazing how quickly things stop. And, other free agencies don't work this way, right? It feels like baseball free agency goes on for months. Like the best players intentionally don't sign right at the start. But, it's just a different vibe in hockey. It really is like musical chairs. And so there's a lot of value in getting something done quickly. And so we'll see where it goes with Roslovic. I mean, certainly he's got interest. It's not that. I think it's more now just making the right decision for him and for the teams to figure it out. But it's amazing how I actually love it, frankly, because selfishly it does, it lessens the news value of what's going on around the league. But I don't get the feeling, honestly, too much is happening right now in the NHL. I mean, most of the other shows that do the same thing we do have already closed up for business. And here we are punching away on a mid-July day almost.
Just squeezing the orange juice as best as we can. Before we get to Stick Daps, I'd like to do a very brief exit interview. I've got 3 questions for you, which will allow you to kind of look back on the year that was and also kind of look in the future. Just 3 questions.
Okay. I'm worried I'm going to botch this segment because I don't know the questions. And I will say I'm feeling a little brain dead. Like you're going to ask about this season, and I'm going to have to trouble remembering this season.
No, don't worry about it. The questions are very. I specifically made them as specific as I could, so that way you wouldn't have to think too hard about when did this happen? These are very specific moments that I know for sure you're going to be really quick in your brain, and you just have to tell me what you think. Here's the first question I have for you. I will say it's hilarious to go through the run of how busy it is, into the end of June, start of July, and to stop. Literally, I don't know. I feel like I'm still picking up the pieces mentally. It's hard to explain because you're just in it so intensely. It must be, again, it's not the equivalent, but it must be how the players feel when they finally the playoffs end. Because you're just in it. You're just living every day. You're only focused on very short-term goals in front of you. It's a grind. You're pushing yourself. And then all of a sudden it ends. And you're almost looking around whoa, what next? And then the exhaustion hits. And so anyway, I'm just saying I'm a little stunned in the moment. Don't worry. We got you covered on that. The first question I have for you. What was the more memorable story to cover from this past season? Mikko Rantanen getting traded twice, or Mitch Marner's exit from the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I'd probably go with Mikko Rantanen just because of the surprise factor there. I mean, certainly the initial trade from Colorado to Carolina was a real, that was a truly big blockbuster deal. Went down on a Friday night in January, and a lot of people didn't really see it coming, right? There wasn't much smoke around that. There had been some talk, are they working on an extension with the Avalanche? Obviously, there were discussions between the team and the player, but I don't think too many people saw him getting traded. And seeing him traded to Carolina was a very interesting deal. And then you go almost immediately into the Four Nations break, and then word, emerges that he's not ready to sign with the Hurricanes. And all of a sudden, he's back in trade rumors again and sort of on again, off again. And ultimately gets dealt, late on March 6th or the morning of March 7th, which was the trade deadline in Dallas. So I think that storyline, while maybe didn't make as big headlines in the city I live in, obviously as anything regarding Mitch Marner. The Marner one was less of a surprise to me. I kind of thought it kind of ended how I saw it ending, more or less. I'm not saying I predicted it down to a T, but, it was pretty clear he didn't want to stay at this time last year. And so I just thought that was going to be a slow drip. I didn't think they were going to hardball him out of town. I just thought he would play out the year and then they'd go their separate ways. And that's kind of where that story ended up. But, going into next season, the Marner, coming back to Toronto angle or the first game against the Leafs, or even just how he performs there, I think will be probably the bigger story, if that makes sense, because you got a chance to see Rantanen in the playoffs, and he obviously scored all those goals, especially in the Winnipeg series. But now, casting forward, the martyr of those two storylines becomes more interesting, just how he plays, how he handles the contract, how he handles switching teams for the first time. I think there's a lot of reason to believe he's going to be, it's almost like a load of bricks off his shoulders, a new fresh start, letting the spring air into the house. I could see it being very positive for him in the Golden Knights, but who knows? And then on top of that, obviously, his return to Toronto will be something. And the craziest I've ever attended was John Tavares going back to Long Island for the first time, and the snakes in the parking lot and people driving over his jersey. And it was crazy. It was crazy. I don't know if it'll reach that kind of level, because I don't think that Marner is a complete villain for everybody across the Leafs nation. There certainly are some members of the fan base that will see him that way. But anyway, I'll be fascinated to see how that all goes down. And, we get the NHL schedule comes out next week, so we'll actually get a sense of when that will fall in the calendar too. I think it'd be interesting if it happens early in the season.
I don't know if it'll be snakes, but I think we'll see some drip jerseys. We'll see maybe a fire or two, not near the arena, but like someone. I think it'll be bad. I think it's going to be bad. I still think that at least in the immediacy of it all, there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings over Mitch. It's going to be bad. I don't think it'll be like, I don't think we'll see snakes. Hey, maybe we will, but
he'll get booed.
I'll go. He'll get booed for sure. Oh yeah, he's getting booed.
What made the Tavares one so unique was it was so much more than just being booed. It was like visceral, and it was angry. Like I don't know that it'll be the same levels of anger. Honestly, I still think there's a lot of Leafs fans out there that are of two minds. They might be angry that it went the way it did. If you watch Steve's Era Wasted video, like there's a lot of conflicting feelings in there too, because Mitch Marner did so much that made people happy in Toronto and was a signal. He was kind of part of the hope that this team sold for a lot of years. And so while some people are probably upset the way it's all gone down, I don't know if it'll be outright anger. Like I think that people in Long Island, a lot of the hardcore Islanders fans thought that they were duped by Tavares, that he, was always saying like he wanted to wait to negotiate and then he left. I don't know that same feeling exists here. I mean, I'm not a fan, and I can't say for sure. I think that's part of what makes those games interesting. I hope they do it on a Saturday. Those games tend to be better anyway. But that's one of those things going into next season that I'm already thinking like that'll be a pretty interesting night to cover.
Me too. Question 2. Canada emerged as the winning team at this year's Four Nations Face-Off. Are they your pick to win Olympic gold in 2026?
I mean, I look at it the other way. I look at like the odds are against Canada a little bit because they've done so much winning in best-on-best tournaments. And the truth is, as we saw at the World Hockey Championship, I mean, Denmark beat Canada. You get into single game eliminations in hockey, a lot of things can happen, right? Belarus beat Sweden in the semifinals or the quarterfinals, in Salt Lake City on a goal from center ice by Tommy Salo, right? I mean, you just introduce this game is so chaotic. I think it's hard to win again and again. And again, not only is it hard to be the best, but it's hard to get those bounces in your favor. I mean, you go back to that championship game against the U.S. at the Four Nations. The U.S. had 3 great chances in overtime before finally Connor McDavid scored the winning goal for Canada. But that easily, were it not for some great saves by Jordan Binnington or, maybe just a little bit different shot decision by, whether it was Kachuk at the side of the net or Matthews had a few looks, like that could easily have been a U.S. win. So I will say Canada is not my pick to win, just because I think you can't win everything, and it's got to be the U.S. I mean, to me, what I learned from the Four Nations is that they were every bit as good as people were projecting they would be. Like we finally got to see it. They were full value for the win in the round robin against Canada. Came up a little short in the gold medal game, but I mean, tremendous game. Goes to overtime, a 3-2 game. I mean, by definition, the U.S. had the lead in that game. Like that could easily have been their night too. So I think the Americans should probably be the favorites based on where they're at, where the players are at. And but they're carrying around some expectations now too. And they're trying to end a long drought for their country in this kind of tournament. So it's not going to be easy, but the U.S. is my favorite.
Man, just the Four Nations face-off popping off the way that it did might be the most unexpected thing for me looking back at this year. I genuinely thought it was just going to be so and not all that compelling, and then it ended up becoming the most compelling thing in that moment. And I get that a lot of exterior factors help make that possible too, specifically the relations between USA and Canada at the time. But for it to pop off with the fights in Montreal, the overtime winner from McDavid, the quality of games we got, that was some special hockey. And I know how you feel about best on best. Like, that was a perfect reintroduction for all of us with the NHL players in a moment like that.
Yeah, and to me, the whole story begins and ends with the players. It mattered to them, so it mattered to us, right? Like, they played like it mattered. They battled on the ice. It's not just the fights. I mean, look, there won't be any fights at the Olympics. International rules don't allow that to happen. So that was a unique aspect of that tournament you won't see recreated in Milan. But because the players wanted this so badly, they made it a compelling tournament and worth watching and worth covering. So I think the same thing's going to happen in Italy. It's going to be a different vibe, though, right? I mean, you're far away from home. There's not a home ice vibe to the Olympics in any way. I mean, the Italians will have a team, but obviously it wouldn't be a medal favorite given where they are in international hockey. So it's gonna be a different thing, but you can't beat the Olympic stage. And to win a gold medal for your country is every athlete's dream on some level. And hockey players haven't had a chance to do that in it's going to be 12 years when you get to February. So I think that tournament will be pretty darn good too, but it's going to be, let's face it, it's going to be hard to replicate. It's going to be impossible to replicate what we had at the Four Nations. Great. It was truly for me the highlight of my season, honestly. To say nothing bad about the cup final or the playoffs. I mean, lots of great moments in this year. You had the Ovechkin goal chase. There was a lot of great things that happened, but the most fun I had doing the job was at 10 days in February or whatever it was.
Man, it's funny looking back on the year. Yeah, the goal chase that was with Alexander Ovechkin. My next question doesn't have anything to do with him, but the fact that we were able to see that finally come to an end. I mean, he's still playing. I mean, he could still get to 900, but like that, I'll give a moment to that. Like, that was also pretty cool to follow. Once he was getting down to 10 goals or less, we should give a moment to that.
Well, especially with his injury too. I mean, there was a lot of doubt, going into the new year, whether he would just have enough time, enough games to get it done. But, he had a pretty special run to see it through. So, yeah, the great ones kind of find a way. That's what that felt like. It started to feel inevitable, weirdly, by the end. But you look at the season he had at his age. I mean, I'll go out on a limb and say I'll take the under on his goal total next year. I think it'll be almost impossible for him to have those kind of numbers again. But, he was pushed by the record. Obviously, his teammates were behind it. The Capitals had a great regular season, which helped. And they looked like they were having a lot of fun as he was chasing them down that milestone.
One last question for you. Will the Florida Panthers three-peat next season? Are they on the verge of a dynasty?
Well, they're on the verge of a dynasty for me just by being in 3 straight Cup finals and then winning 2 of them. So even if they take a year off, that to me, they're still in dynasty territory. And obviously they have the whole heart of the team signed now for multiple years. So there'll be changes, but they're not significant changes to what this core has been. I'm gonna take the field. I think that it's so damn hard to win. So many things have to go right. I'm not taking anything away from their cup win. I mean, to me, what's more impressive is they got better in their third run to the cup. 2025 was probably their best team, quite honestly. Now, part of that's the trade for Brad Marchand and how great he fit in and, gave them a third line that, as any that we've seen in probably modern terms of hockey and in the cap era, in terms of what they were able to do. Maybe back to the HPK line in Pittsburgh 10 years ago, that made a big difference as the third line when they had Hagelin, Bonino, and Kessel there for the Penguins. But, it was that kind of difference-making line when you look at Florida's playoff run in particular, the way they outscored opponents and did a lot of that damage at even strength. So Florida's set up for another great run at it. I just think at some point, you run out of magic, you get a bad bounce your way, you have injury issues that maybe impact your team. And so it's going to be fascinating to watch them try to do it. I think they're a team for sure. They're at the stage. They just need to get in the playoffs. It doesn't matter if they're a wild card team. You're still going to, no one is going to want to face them in round one. But I'm taking the no three-peat just because there's a reason it hasn't happened and how long it's been. Even the great 80s Oilers didn't three-peat. I mean, they won in bunches. They didn't win 3 in a row. I mean, that's how tough it is. And so I think Florida is going to have a really difficult time doing that. But maybe they'll have me eat my words. I think I picked Edmonton in that final. So in my mind, I was already wrong about them once. Maybe I'll be wrong about them again.
Oilers-Panthers Part 3 would be, I mean, we're all going to watch it if that happens again, but I'd be kind of down for that.
Yeah, I don't know where the Oilers are at. It's hard to, they still have the best, the best players doing their thing. So it's hard to think that they won't be a really good team, but it just feels, we'll see. I like the Mangiapane signing. I think for what the kind of players I have to identify that they can sort of be swing players that can play in their top 6, I think he fits into that vision. The goaltending as of this recording is unchanged. They're making a change of goalie coach, but not, at least not at this point with anyone who's strapping on the pads and having to go out there between the pipes. And so I don't know what we'll see from the Oilers, but I mean, look, healthy Zach Hyman back, hopefully. I mean, they're gonna be in the mix starting the year as one of the teams in the West that has a chance. But for the same reasons, it's so hard to win 3 in a row. It's hard to get back to 3 in a row, and so it's gonna be a steep climb up. And we know that they're going to see Vegas at some point again, just because that's what always happens. We'll see if Los Angeles can take a jump. It's going to be another great season. I know that much.
Don't forget Ike Howard, part of that forward alignment for Edmonton as well, with the trade that happened this week with Tampa Bay and prospect Sam O'Reilly. I'm curious where he fits in that lineup too. But very intrigued about the Oilers.
Yeah, they with Howard, I mean, they just see someone who can play right away, right? Whereas Sam O'Reilly, who had a great year actually in the Ontario Hockey League after being drafted, and remember Edmonton traded up to get him, the last pick of that draft at the Sphere in 2024, and I think he's still a great prospect for them. But Edmonton is prioritizing the now over the longer term. We'll see over the longer term which player has a better career. But Ike Howard's older and is, in their view, closer to making a difference in their lineup. Probably going to play games this season.
All right, we have reached the end of the episode, our season finale of season 4, which means it's time for stick taps. I can't think of anyone who deserves a stick tap more at the end of season 4 than our fans, our listeners, our watchers who have stuck with us for 360 episodes. Thank you all so much for tapping into the CJ Show and just following us as we cover some of the biggest stories in the hockey world. It is an honor and a privilege to do the show with you, Siege, and it's an honor to deliver this content for fans. We really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, I hope everyone out there has a great summer. Just grass. Has a few days where they don't think about hockey and obsess with hockey because it's always, I think it's getting a little bit of a refresh and a break is always brings you back with even more passion and enthusiasm for what you love. So there's nothing wrong with that. And yeah, enjoy the sun if you're somewhere where you only get it a couple months a year, like you and I are. And and if there's big news, we'll be back. And if not, it's probably going to be a few weeks here until we get back closer to Labor Day.
Season 5. Can't wait for that. If you would have told me at the beginning of this podcast we get to a season 5, I'd be like, that's pretty good. That's pretty great. So I really appreciate everybody who helps make this show a possibility every week by watching us and subscribing to the pod. Subscribe to the pod if you haven't done so already, whether through YouTube, the SDPN page, or through Spotify or through Apple. Leave a rating. That helps us out a lot. And as CJ said, we'll be back in the summer if more news arises. And CJ, to you, great work throughout this entire season. Great work as always. And again, always a pleasure to do these episodes with you, man. And I'm looking forward to season 5.
Right on, brother. Enjoy Stampede.
I will. Enjoy your summer.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.